welcome. This is Quick Take. I'm one of your hosts, Susie Talmanchuk, along with my good friend, James
James
Caps.
Caps. There was a
How are
pregnant
you?
pause there. I
I
thought you
know. I
might
was
have
trying to
forgotten who
think.
I was.
No, I was trying to think of something else to say about you, and it just didn't come. So I just went right to your name.
Just
So there
straight
you
to the
go.
name. Yep.
That's,
Your dear friend and dance partner, James Caps.
yeah, even though we've never danced before, but
We've
we
never
can go
danced.
with that. We can go with that.
It works. It works.
So we're going to talk a little bit about multi-generational today. And it's as I always do, it's almost like the meeting before the meeting. I had a meeting with somebody that is a very senior leader in a senior role. And actually his boss, his name is Mylan. Mylan. That's
That's a
not
weird
his
name.
real name. Well, that's
That's
actually
a
my
good makeup name.
granddaughter's name. So
Okay.
I'm going to start using her name as
The
you're not
fake
supposed to tell
name.
your secret right up, but I just am. All right. So,
That works.
Mylan, he is a senior executive, been running sales, very successful, always getting his numbers. But his boss had told him to work with me around communication.
Oh yeah.
And I know him. I've seen him in many meetings. I have a lot of exposure to him. And what I would say about him, he's very positive. He's almost he's one of those guys he's almost too positive. Like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
some of his filler
Yeah.
words are like, but it's really good. Which is
Mm,
nice, but it's like there's a time and place for that. And he goes on and on. Like when we're in a topic with all of his peers, he
right.
tends to take a lot more time than everybody else. And
Oh sure. Sure. Sure.
you have
Sure.
to listen along to figure out his point 3 minutes in
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then start tracking with him. So he's not
Mm,
great about kind of
bringing
making
it home.
his communication flow. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we were just talking, and I thought this is a great. There's part of it is he's older, he's kind of set in his
Hmm.
ways, and he's
Right.
successful, so he thinks it's
Sure.
working well. And
Right.
so I do think there's a miss between what he believes is his strong suit and how that feels to his team, because he has a big team that is responsible for a lot of the business.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge for a lot of us leaders as and it's we can talk about age, but I think it's really time and seat and
Yeah.
comfort. And ultimately, there's a challenge for all of us to maintain our self-awareness, right? Where we have a perspective that ensures that we are both aware of what we're doing, but also, understanding that we still have stuff to learn. I always say that if I'm the smartest man in the room, I'm in the wrong room, because ultimately, I only know what I know and I'd like to learn more. So I think as we talk about leadership with people who have different levels of experience, different generations, different cultures, I think all of those apply when we are how we manage those groups of people as leaders.
I completely agree. I will tell you, I'm working with probably 4 VP level teams right now.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think there's a little bit of a fear around, I'm here now, I better know how to lead.
Yeah, that's so
And
true.
and it's like, no, this is an evolution that you always need to kind of zoom out and evaluate to
Yep.
figure out what you need to do next, because you're evolving along with your people and you have to be open to that.
Yeah, I think, and companies do a poor job of doing leadership training, as you well know.
Yeah.
And
Keeps me
so a lot
employed.
of times, yeah, it does keep you employed. Unfortunately, not enough because there's a tremendous amount of
Totally.
companies and leaders who, to your point, you're promoted, therefore you should know.
Yeah.
And I think that the leaders who are seasoned and have experience get to a place where they're like, and they realize I don't know, and I still have stuff to learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think when we talk about specifically the multi-generational concept, we can talk about diverse cultures and we can talk about global leadership maybe on another time. But I think the generational element is really a common topic and a
Hmm.
common struggle for, I think, a lot of seasoned leaders. If I had a buck for every leader who said, kids these days or Gen insert letter here, they just don't get it.
Yeah.
My knee jerk reaction is, well, maybe you don't get it.
Yeah.
And I really want people to do that self examination because ultimately that's not going to change. There's going to be another generation behind them, and that evolves, and that evolution is going to continue. And as leaders, we need to explore that and be successful. And I think we could talk about some ways to be successful.
All right, you're right. There's a lot of topics under this
Hmm.
title or this, a lot of subtopics. Why
Yeah,
don't we talk about the communication aspect of it and
sure,
what are the best practices at that level, the executive level? I'll just say VP and above.
sure.
And what are those things that people need to be thinking of?
Well, I think that the most important thing is first, you need to be comfortable re examining your communication
Yeah.
style, right? And I think that to the example of Mylan there, that individual had a style that has probably worked for X number of years, or more importantly, maybe in a particular industry or a particular subset. You know, messaging to developers is very different than messaging to salespeople, which is very different to messaging to finance folks. And so you have to have that awareness about how you are messaging and how you're communicating. There's a lot of interesting ways to do that. I know we were talking earlier about one of the suggestions you made in that conversation. Why don't you mention that? I thought that was really powerful.
Oh, about the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, what there's such a big impact in terms of asking questions because when you
Mm,
ask questions, that forces the other person to think.
right.
So it gives this impression that you have great ideas because they have to
Hmm.
think.
Yep.
And so actually, I'm glad you asked me because I told him, "You have to change your mindset in order for you to show up differently." And
Mm.
so what I told him was, instead of thinking about what you're gonna say next, think about what you're gonna ask next.
Oh gosh, so
And
powerful.
his aha was he's really good at that in front of the customer, but he wasn't practicing that for in front of his
Mm.
boss.
Oh, or maybe even his employees.
Yes. And so even thinking about what really works and changing, like you said, assess how are you coming across? How are you communicating? And what
Hmm.
can I
Hmm.
change? And even asking yourself, what in this time and place is going to work best for the people that are listening to me?
Yeah, I think that's critical. I love that. That Socratic method, that question, the five whys, the one of the
Hmm.
classic books about leadership. I think that's a great example of as a leader, if you're more comfortable or historically have done lecturing, have done the memo style communication, pivoting to asking questions. I think that's a really great example of that first piece of advice I'd like to give there is check your communication style and maybe adjust.
Yep. And is it working for the here and now?
That's exactly right. And I think that really the second one kind of pivots on that. So there's that adjusting your communication style, but then also adjusting your leadership style. So
Hmm.
you have to be comfortable with the fact that, the quintessential GE hierarchy may not exist at your company any longer. You may not have multiple layers. You may be very flat. You may have a staff that's more comfortable speaking directly to you. Or, like in my case, a staff that is too comfortable coming directly to
Yeah.
me, and you need to embrace the hierarchy and empower your folks. And so I think that obviously suggesting adjusting your communication style is key, but adjusting your leadership style, having that self-awareness, knowing that that might need to be adjusted, I think is equally important.
And so how would you do that? Would you look at the meetings that you're having and kind of think through like how do you evaluate that and zoom out and be able to see it
Hmm.
from a different
Hmm.
perspective?
I like to ask folks, how is this working for you? How are these
Okay.
meetings working for you? Are you getting value out of this?
Yeah.
The honest truth is, it goes back to the previous example, ask questions, but just simply saying, are you getting value out of our staff meeting? Um, are you getting value out of our one-on-ones? What's missing from what's missing from you, allowing you to be successful? I also am a big fan of skip levels. I love to probe the folks below the people underneath me, just because you're going to get a different point of view, and that can inform different ways of doing it. Um,
Mhm.
I think the other one that I think you and I talk about a lot is also talking to folks at other companies. Every
Mhm.
every group has its own culture, and every company has got it's dipped in history. But you talk to another company, and suddenly it's just a bank just like we are, but they're doing it radically different. That's an epiphany. So reaching out, finding other ways, and just exploring alternatives, I think, is huge.
Oh, I think that's so good. I talk to so many people that when I talk about networking outside of their
Hmm.
business, they're like, "Ah, what a missed
Why would I do that?
opportunity."
That's insanity. Yeah,
Yes, it's
yeah.
crazy. All right, so what's the third one?
I think really understanding that within the different generations, they have different perspectives, and the different drivers. And it's really easy as leaders to try to put ourselves in your employees' shoes. But just imagine a world where you can't possibly do that. That what their perspective is so orthogonal to what you think, but it's
Ooh,
okay, right? And the fact that
yeah,
perhaps their end game is not whatever your end game is, but it's very different. And I think, where we have like a really good example is we talk about there are folks who are more interested in the experience side of an economy versus buying things. Hey, I want to go somewhere versus buy something or,
yeah,
or get something. And
yeah,
that perspective is different. Imagine your employees are not really interested in saving up for retirement. They're more interested in going on a trip this year. Now,
yeah.
that's that's not unacceptable. That's just different than you, perhaps. And so, accepting the fact that there are different perspectives, exploring and finding ways to understand them, really changes the way that you will lead as a leader. You're going to have to find different ways to motivate folks. You're going to have to find different ways to communicate to folks, and that's super important when you start to realize that they have a different point of view.
Oh, that's so good, and I would say don't assume you know, even if you
Absolutely.
believe you know. And here's a quick tip, tactic. When you're done saying something or you wanting their input, practice silence.
Oh, absolutely.
And before you jump in, practice silence because sometimes they don't know what's on their mind. And so
Hmm.
if you ask, kind of tell me a little bit more about what you enjoy or what, let them finish and don't jump in right away.
Right, right.
Let the
Don't save
silence
them.
linger.
Don't save
Yes,
them. My
don't
people have
save
such a
them.
tendency to save people when it's uncomfortable. I am horrible about that. I don't like putting people on the spot. But there's a
Really?
difference between I know it's hard to believe. But I don't like there's a difference between putting people on the spot and giving them space.
Yeah.
And if you can understand and embrace that reality, it actually creates a better outcome.
Yeah. I think that's really, as leaders, it's really interesting to think about shifting your mindset around asking those questions, making
Hmm. Hmm.
space, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
observing. As I
But
mentioned
each
before,
Yep.
John McKee said, People who are really wise don't jump in to prove themselves.
Right.
They
Yep.
spend the time just understanding and listening, and I think that's profound.
No, I think he's absolutely right. John has said many profound things over the years, and
Yeah.
that's one of them. But I think, yeah, if we loop it back, the three ways that I think each one of us as leaders can really effectively navigate the challenging space that does come with being a seasoned individual with a diverse and multi generational team. We've got to understand that situation. And I think the three things we talked about is one, understanding your communication style, asking questions, don't lecture, you know see how other people are communicating, evaluate that. So communication style,
Yep.
leadership style, changing the way that you empower folks, the way that you are being responsive, understand what was working for your people and what's not. And then the third one is really embracing diverse thinking, and know that what motivates folks and what motivates your teams is, and most likely, very different than what motivates you. And if you embrace that versus try to change it, you'll get and have a much more effective team.
Yeah, and it's a work in progress. I think
Absolutely.
it's not stamp it and it's done. Put the chip in and you're good to go as a leader. So
Yeah, and I
embrace
think
that
that
too.
it's so true. And I think about this a lot. I've been with my company. I've been with BlackRock for coming up on 3.5 years, and I would argue every year has been a radically different year.
Hmm.
Started in COVID. Next
Yeah.
year, not in COVID. Sort of in COVID, not in COVID. Yes, in COVID, not in COVID. Third year, we're not in COVID, but we're not pretend. We are what are we don't know. Is it COVID? Yes, no. And now we're not in COVID. And so every year has required me to change my leadership
Yeah,
style
it's
in a
been good.
major way.
Yeah.
And it's not just, and so I look back even on the way I was managing it a year ago, and it's different than what I'm doing today. So that's just the reality of the world we live in. And I think the folks and leaders that are open to change are the ones that'll be successful.
There you go. The silver lining of the pandemic. There you go. Thank you for that.
Yeah, help force you to flex muscles you didn't know you had.
All right. This was good. I think this is really good. I sometimes,
Great
I
topic.
never know exactly what's going to come out, but I give you a
This is a good one. Tied
two
a boat on
two
it.
thumbs up in my evaluation, my rating system. So
And
there you
that's
go.
really the only evaluation system I care about.
Yeah, whatever. Well, we appreciate our quick stirs. So thanks for joining us. Feel free. We'd love you to follow us on LinkedIn. We want to hear from you, ask us questions, DM us. We are open to it and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate you.